Hello everyone, Andrew Boylan here, and we are going to talk about the 5th episode of Season 1, The Wedding Gift. This is... Okay, I'm going to say this in every vlog, but hands down, when I saw Season 1 for the first time, I found myself watching this episode a lot. I mean a lot. And I really, really love... that. Can I just say one thing? Because I was... Okay, before I did this... I just want to say just for future references here, when I do these vlogs, even though I've seen these episodes so many times, especially season 1, over and over again to the point where I can quote most of these episodes, I always watch them again right before I do these vlogs because there's just so much going on. I don't want to leave anything out. So I just finished watching it literally a minute ago, this episode, and I had this thought when I was watching, and this is just a side note, this is more of a production question here. I've never filmed a movie or a show or anything that involved a wedding sequence, but I gotta say, for all the movies and shows I've seen that involve scenes of a wedding reception or a wedding ceremony, that's got to be hard to shoot. I mean, you have so many extras. Everybody's got to stand on their mark for continuity reasons. And there's got to be so much that goes into shooting that. Because I'm watching this, because most of this episode is about the wedding at Cana. And I'm just watching it, and I'm thinking, because again, I've seen it so many times, but I'm just thinking in my head, I started thinking of The Godfather. Like, the first 30 minutes of that movie is a wedding reception scene, you know? So I'm just thinking, like, wow, like... that's got to be rough to shoot because you just have so many extras. There's just so much going on, you know, because you just get lost in it and you think, wow, like, was a real wedding reception going on when they filmed this? Because this looks legit. And no, it's, you know, but I don't know. I was just thinking about that. So anyway, let's talk about the episode. So this is one of my favorite episodes of the season series, I would say. This one I watched a lot. So this is The Wedding Gift. Now, we're introduced to a couple of new characters in this episode. We are introduced to future Apostle Thomas for the first time, and he is he's very it's funny though, he's very punctual. He doesn't want to screw up. He always wants to do things according to his plan, and you know, he's very not so much consumed with himself, but he just doesn't want to screw up. You know, he's always double-checking things before he does something, always wants to make sure what's the right thing to do, am I protected here, should I have a backup plan in case something goes wrong here, you know, something like that. And so the episode opens up with, oh man, you know, there's just so much going on in this episode. Let me think for a minute. So it opens up with, actually it opens up when Jesus is 12 years old. And again, I haven't read all of the Bible, but I believe this is one of the few, other than when Jesus was born, this is one of the few accounts that we know about Jesus when he was a child. Because most of the stuff recorded in the Bible is when Jesus was teaching, you know, when he was in his 30s. There's very little stuff about him when he was a child, except for this, when he was 12 years old and Mary loses him and she doesn't know where he is, and it turns out he was where was he, at the synagogue or the temple or something, preaching to the Sanhedrin, I think, or I forget who he was preaching to, but basically Mary can't find him, and she's with Joseph and she doesn't know where he is, and she finds him. And she's like, you know, don't ever do that. You know, you scared me. And he goes, Mother, you knew I would be talking to my father. She goes, Joseph, you weren't with Joseph. What are you talking about? You were supposed to be with your father. And he goes, I was. But Jesus is talking about, you know, he's talking about the Heavenly Father. And they have this moment where Mary looks at Jesus. And this is when he was 12 years old. And she says to him, you know, don't do that to me. Tell me where you're going. And he's talking about preaching, and he looks at her and he goes, if not now, when? And I'm like, oh wow, that's pretty good. And that's gonna come back into play later. So So they end up leaving. Opening credits happen. By the way, one of the best theme songs. Like, I love this theme song in the show. I really do. And I love the opening credit sequence with the fish. You know, all the fish are just going with the flow, but then some of them will turn and go against the current. Yeah. And they're the ones that turn teal blue. I love that. And I never noticed this, and I might have mentioned this in one of the earlier vlogs, but I was watching Dallas Jenkins, because season 3 is airing right now. And I was watching Dallas Jenkins do one of those live streams, and he did mention that if you notice in the opening credits, there's 13 blue fish at the very end swimming around. One for Jesus and the other 12 for the apostles. And I never noticed that before. I never noticed that. There's always 13 fish that are teal, and the rest of them are black and white. They're faded. They don't have any color because they're just going with the flow. So that I really, really like. I never noticed that before, but now when I watch the opening credits, I'm like, oh yeah, I never noticed it. So anyway, but I like that. I like that little touch that they do. So then we cut to the wedding. They have, I forget the names. I wish I remember the names. But anyway, they have the wedding at Cana. Mary is there. Jesus' mom, Mary. So she's helping them get it prepared and get everything ready. And then we cut to Nicodemus questioning John the Baptist in a prison. And John is talking to Nicodemus, and he tells him, you know, this was a really interesting scene, and I've read something like this that's very similar in the Bible. It's like, he's talking to Nicodemus, and he goes, I hate your flock. I don't like your flock. He's telling that to Nicodemus, like, you know, like, you're a holy man, and yet you don't want to do what you're supposed to do out of the goodness of your heart. You're doing it at a price. You know, you charge us to do things. You do it because you want the glory. It's not for God. You're doing it for yourself. But Nicodemus wants to know what happened with Mary Magdalene, because he just can't figure it out. Yes, he's a Pharisee, but he's like, I want to know what's going on, because there's no way Mary Magdalene was healed by herself. There's no way that could have happened. It had to come from God or something. And he knows that Mary Magdalene said that this man healed me. It wasn't Nicodemus, it was this man, and he wouldn't reveal his name. She didn't know his name at the time. And he says this to John the Baptist, and John the Baptist is like, he wouldn't reveal his name? He goes, yeah. And he's like, I know him. And Nicodemus is like, you know him? He goes, you can say that. Well, of course, they're cousins. and he starts quoting Solomon. John the Baptist starts quoting Solomon to Nicodemus, like, you know, who has gathered the winds in his hand. And Nicodemus, he still doesn't get it. He's like, don't quote Solomon to me. Tell me his name. Tell me who he is. And he said, teacher of Israel, finish the scripture. Finish it. What is the name and what is his name and what is the name of his son? And he goes, surely you know. And Nicodemus looks at him. He's like, you are careless with Torah. God doesn't have a son. Israel is his children. And he's like, nope. You don't know yet. You don't know him yet. and he tells him, he goes, make way for the king. He's here to awaken the earth. But some people will not want to wake. They're in love with the darkness. And he looks at Nicodemus. He goes, I wonder which one you'll be. Like, oh, that is great. That is great. I see, you know, what's going on in the world right now, behind the scenes, I gotta tell you, I see so much of God just coming at, it's hard to explain, but it's almost like I feel like the Lord is talking to me in some ways through this show. I don't know if anybody else has that feeling. I'm pretty sure they do. I got a feeling they do. So anyway, that's going on. And then, you know, he says, you know, but Nicodemus is also that, because Nicodemus is thinking in the flesh. He's not thinking in the spiritual. And he says, you know, I just want to warn you, John the Baptist, you know, they'll put a man to death for blasphemy like that. If I were you, I would I wouldn't say those things if you want to protect him. Protect Jesus. And he looks at him, John the Baptist looks at Nicodemus and he goes, preacher, if you think he needs my help, you've learned nothing. That was pretty good. So that happens. Then we cut back to the wedding. And Jesus calls... Oh, so Simon goes to see his wife Eden after what happened with the fish. And he tells Eden about it. And she is so relieved and happy. And she's like, this is the man I married. You're not deceitful with me. You should follow him. You should totally go with him. He goes, it's not going to be easy. And she's like, oh, when have we had anything easy? It's not our people's way. And I'm like, oh my god, like this show is just so good, man. Like, I just love the dialogue in this show. And so, they have a scene together, and he says, well, I'm going to go with Andrew. We're invited to a wedding at Cana. He wants to take his students there. I'm one of the students now. And so they walk off. It's Jesus and... Who are the disciples at this point? It's Simon, Andrew, James, John, Thaddeus, and James, the other James. In fact, that's where it happens here. So there's two Jameses there, and Jesus is like, how do we solve this? And John's brother James says, well, how about if I go by Big James? Because he's taller than the other James. He's like, well, is that acceptable to you, little James? Yeah, okay, it's settled then. And that seems fair. Okay, let's move. So, like, that's when they started calling the other James Little James. So that's how, because there's two Jameses. And so they start walking, and, Simon's like, he talks to Jesus. He's like, Master, if we're gonna get this thing going, your ministry, if we're gonna get this thing going, maybe we should do something, at the wedding. And he goes, well, Simon, it's not my day. It's not my day. It's the day of the bride and the groom. It's not my day here. But my Ema will be there. My mom, Mary, and they haven't met Mary yet. So he's like, she's gonna be there. And Simon and Andrew start bickering, and Jesus turns to Mary Magdalene. He goes, Mary, did you ever think that having brothers would be like this? And she goes, oh, I've always wanted brothers ever since I was a little girl. And he goes, well, don't worry. Soon you'll have 12. Then tell me how you like it. And Andrew's like, 12? And Jesus turns to him and he goes, you'll see. It's little things like that. I love the foreshadowing in this show. I love the way it's done here. It's just so great. And so they go to the wedding at Cana, and there's Thomas and Rama. We're introduced to Rama also. She's helping him. There seems to be a romance brewing there. I mean, I don't know if it's happening between the two of them in this episode, but I certainly felt it. It was very subtle, but I could see it happening, and we get a little further into that down the road. So, Thomas is putting the wine together, and Rama's counting. Turns out there's not 40 people there. There's 80 people there, and they don't have enough wine. And they're going to run out. So the whole wedding, Thomas is trying to figure this out. He's trying to figure out what to do, how to preserve it. Don't refill their cups. Don't, take all the time you need. And... the other thing that was happening here, and I really enjoyed this. One of the, I think it was, because this is a wedding for the groom and the bride, and I think it's the bride's parents, or the son's parents. I forget who it was. I think it's the groom's parents. His dad he's one of the in-laws. He's very rude. He's very, he boasts about himself. He's drunk a lot. He's very, very consumed with himself. And he's like that throughout a majority of the episode. So finally, we get to the end of the wedding, and there's no wine left. None. They can't do anything. And Mary knows about this, and she goes to tell Jesus about this. And before she does, there's something else I want to mention here. This is the first... I think this is one of the reasons why I love this episode. Like I said, there's so much going on in this episode. This is the first time where we start to see something I've never seen before in any media, movie, show that portrays Jesus Christ. This is the first time we ever see Jesus making jokes with his disciples and having a smile on his face and being funny and having a good time with his friend. I've never seen that. Not like this. And he's talking to Simon and Andrew, and Simon's making fun of the way that Andrew can't dance. He's a horrible dancer, and Simon and Jesus is laughing and goes, "Oh, Andrew, do you deny it?" And then Mary comes up and she tells Jesus, she's like, they've run out of wine. There's no wine left. We have, they're going to be humiliated, and the parents will be humiliated too if we don't have enough wine. And Jesus looks at Mary and he goes, "Why are you telling me this?" She goes, They need help." And Jesus knows what she's talking about. And he says, "Simon, Andrew, you guys go over there for a little while, okay? Leave me to be with my Ema." They go, okay, and they leave. And he's talking to Mary, and he says, "Mother, my time has not yet come. Hasn't come yet." And she looks at him, she goes, "If not now, when?" And I'm like, that is so good. That is so good. And so he decides to say, "Okay, all right, okay, my time is coming. Here we go." And he goes over and to meet Thomas. This is the first time Jesus meets with Thomas. He's going to be one of the 12. And he tells him, he goes, "I want you to fill these jars up with water." He goes, I don't think you understood. We ran out of wine, not water." And Jesus looks at him, he goes, "I want you to fill these up with water anyway." And Thomas is like, we're in a crisis here, and I was led to believe that you had some kind of a solution to the problem. And he starts talking to Thomas in a way that nobody really does talk to Thomas before. And he starts telling him, like, "I know about a man like you in Capernaum, Thomas. Always counting, always measuring." He's talking about Matthew, by the way. And Thomas just looks at him and he's like, we don't have time for this. We don't have time for this. And he goes, "Thomas, it's going to be like that sometimes, where you don't see a solution. It's going to be like that." And I tell you, I could feel the Lord talking to me when he said that. Because how many times, let me ask you something. How many times have you have tried to do something and you didn't see the end result, and you tried to take matters into your own hands and not ask God about it? How many times have you done that? Because I've done that many times. Really think about it. And Jesus says to him, he goes, "It is good to ask questions, to seek understanding. I want you to come with me." And Thomas is like, "Go with you where? I don't understand." And Jesus looks at him and he goes, "Keep watching. You'll see." And he says, "I want you to leave the room." Everybody leaves the room, and Jesus has this moment where he looks up, and he talks directly to the Father, and he tells him, he's like, "I'm ready, Father, I'm ready." And he puts his hand in the jar filled with water, and wine comes up right out of his hand. And then he gives it to Thomas and Rama and the servants, and they give it out, and they have that scene where the head of the banquet, he comes out and he goes, "Stop the music. Usually they serve the best wine at the beginning, and then when the people are drunk freely at the end, they serve the poor wine, because who's going to notice? But you," pointing to Thomas and Rama, "you have served the best wine I've ever had in my entire life." And everybody drinks it, and the father-in-law, the guy that's very boastful about himself, and he's very consumed with himself, he drinks the wine, and his wife tells him that he's been pretentious the whole time, and he drinks the wine, and the woman, his wife, says to him, "Is there anything wrong?" And he goes, Yes, I was. It's just... And then Mary thanks Jesus, and he doesn't seek any attention. He doesn't want any glory for that. Nope, it's okay. I didn't do this for attention. I didn't do this miracle. I did this because this man is in trouble, and he believes in me. His faith is strong. That's why. And the time has come for Jesus. His time has come. And here we go. This is the start of it. And Thomas is just in awe of what happened. He never saw this coming. You know, his business was saved. His reputation was saved. He thought it was all over. He didn't know where he was going to go. And then, and so they have the big wedding, and another one of my favorite lines is, Jesus has this moment after Simon knows about it, because he knows, because Simon had something similar with the fish. And after the wine miracle, Simon goes to Jesus and he says, "Fish, wine, what's next?" And Jesus goes, "Any ideas?" And Simon's like, "Anything and everything. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth." And Jesus goes, "I hope so, Simon." Now again, if you know the story, you know, it's going to be interesting to, you know, watch it and see how it pans out. But and then he says, "But first, we need to discuss about Andrew's feet. He can't dance, right?" And and Andrew starts dancing. They all start dancing, and Simon turns to Jesus and he goes, "So do you think you can help him?" And he's looking at Andrew dancing, and Jesus says to Simon, he goes, "Some things even I can't do." That's... The Messiah is saying some things even I can't do. That's hilarious. I love that. That's so funny. That is... I love that line. That's so good. And then, you know, they start packing up and leaving, and Thomas and Rhema are watching Jesus and the disciples leave, and Thomas says, "He asked me to join him." Rhema's like, "Where?" And he goes, "He wants us to meet him in Samaria in 12 days. And he goes, "I don't know what to think." And she looks at him, she says, "Don't think. Don't. Once in your life, don't think. In other words, stop trying to make sense of it. Trust God. Forget yourself and trust God. Because that's the only reason, that's why this miracle happened. Because of your faith." That's why. And episode ends, and that's it. And so this one I really liked a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of layers being peeled here. So we're starting to see more and more about certain things. A lot of things are starting to lead up and come together now. It's going to be interesting to see how far it's going to go. Now, with me, this is season 1. You know, I'm in the middle of season 3. Season 3 wraps up at the end of the week. I'm going to the theaters to go see it this Thursday. So I'm really excited to see how season 3 ends. And by the time I get around to season 3, you know, we'll discuss that. We'll talk about it. Because we're doing an episode a week here. But there's only 8 episodes a season. So probably by summertime we'll get to season 3. But that's the best part, you know, because you guys can watch these once a week. And you can watch along with me. You know, like I said, the app is out there. It's on Netflix. Only season 1 is on Netflix. So if you guys have Netflix, but you don't have the app, you can watch this show along with me. You know, we still got 4 more episodes before we wrap up season 1. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on The Wedding Gift. Great episode, one of my favorites. And I will see you guys in the next episode. See you later.